So South Africa have gone back to back. You've worked with them as well. Can you give us an idea from your perspective, having worked with them, but also being a top coach? Why are they so different? Why did they go back to back?
I just think they've got this incredible belief in their rugby. Like, to me, it's one of the most interesting stories. You look at, Japan beat South Africa 2015, right? That year they played, as they had been, played very traditional South African rugby, So they bring Alistair Kutsia, who wants to play a bit more, a bit more Stormers side to side. And for South Africa, it's not really their identity. They don't get the results they want. They chop Alistair, bring in Rassie, who goes back to dyed-in-the-wool South African rugby. Let's kick, chase, hit them, give them the ball, and then when we get a counter attack, we'll go. And they turn into a World Cup winning team. And at the same time, they change from being a Super Rugby team to a URC team, which I think is a significant difference in the way they're developing their players. And then they cut their Currie Cup from 16 teams to 6 teams. So they went to looking after everyone to looking after the best. And then they've still got this school system that produces this endless stream of talented players. And I was there last year, I think it was, and I saw the Craven. They have the Craven Week for the A teams, Craven Week for B teams, Craven Week for C teams. So everyone gets a chance to play in the national championship, and they're just bringing the players through, changed the way the domestic players play their rugby, and went back to their really strong identity of South African rugby, and it's been such a success. And I asked people who was the major strategist, and no one can really say, because Rassie was definitely in terms of the team, but in terms of the development of the players, I'm not sure who did that. But it's been bloody successful.
Yeah, and it's been, look, from an outside point of view, supporting Scotland, they're in our pool. I had Scotland beating South Africa, just more to fuel the fire. But I've really enjoyed watching South Africa, like their journey they've been on, because they have these emotional touch points which are so important in a contact sport, and going deeper into that and spending some time with Pieter-Steph while I've been here, and Damien, and watching this Chasing the Sun. I know you haven't watched that, but I'm all over it at the minute. But it's undeniable, them emotional touch points when you play a contact sport, right?
Yeah, 100%. And then the other thing I'd add to that, I did a little bit of work with Suntory, and when Chesson was there, and I can understand how they've been so successful. Like, he comes after the World Cup, and he's entitled to take it a bit easy if he wants to, and he could do it, but he trains 100%, last off the field, helps all the young guys, like meticulous in his skill work, absolutely meticulous, and wanting to get better, and they've really got this fantastic mix of players now, haven't they? You think about how South Africa has gone from being, almost Afrikaans side to now this natural mix of Afrikaans, English, South Africans, and you've got your players from the Cape and your black players, and they've all become one team now, and it's almost like the perfect picture of how we should live our lives. Doesn't matter where you come from, just get on with it. There's a purpose there. Let's do it as well as we can.
Yeah, and that's something that I picked up, and actually listening to you speak before, and something that you're big on and coming to Japan is being obsessed with that. And chatting to Pieter-Steph, I was like, who puts the arm around you when the going gets tough? When these injuries are bad, and you're going through these down moments, which happens in sport. And he said his wife. And I was like, what about the coach? He's like, no. And they are very up and down. But trying to ask this question as a dad, also living in the UK, but more so because you've coached England, Australia, South Africa, you're here. Is there an element in parts of rugby sport and society where that kind of softness has now crept in? And I'm going to kind of carry on that point, because when I was with Pieter-Steph, it wasn't putting it on. He was a lovely man, but he was a hard man. From a farm, an affluent farm, one of 4 brothers, dad is out there grafting. There was no softness. You were like this man, and 28 tackles in the final, playing injured, nearly loses his leg, carries on. He's got his dad's hamstring tendon in his knee. And you look at, I'm there looking at, I don't know whether you like using these words like warrior and stuff like that, but there's no softness. And I'm thinking, well, there's no surprise that they've won a World Cup back to back.
Yeah. Look, I think, rugby's as you know better than anyone, it's a hard physical game, And I think the other part of that is that the team sort of has a psychological or a social profile to it, and you've got to know the profile of that team. Like, as you said about Japan, Japan's always had a reputation of being quite tough and quite ferocious, and not ferocious in terms of physical, but in terms of the way they approach their training. And I think that's still part of the identity. And I think you've got to make sure whatever team you coach is that you understand what they can be really good at, and where it's come from, what's the history of the team, what's the character of the team, and try to keep that in place, and at the same time look after individuals as well as you can.